everybody's having a good day. I had a pretty good morning. I'm blessed to get out and enjoy God's creation again and just go fishing. Didn't catch anything real big, but last night we had a big temperature drop. Dropped about, I'd say about 25 degrees less than what it usually is. It's a nice cool morning. It was very peaceful. Wasn't a whole lot of, there's a little bit of wind, I guess, but not a whole lot. Bright bluebird skies. We all know if we do any type of fishing that some days those are hard days. You know, sometimes we're lucky if we even get a bite during that day. Well, I can tell you that I caught fish. I caught a few on that same little jig I've been throwing, that M&J jig, on the same 3/8 ounce that I've been throwing. I changed it up a little bit today though. The color that I usually threw watermelon red. This time I changed it up a little bit. I threw this is called a Bullfrog. And just like any time we go fishing, the main thing we need to do is have a good time. Just enjoy outdoors, enjoy what God's created, enjoy everything around us. But another thing we need to do is we need to learn. We need to learn as we're out there. Some days, guys, I mean, fish are just gonna come off. That's how it is. But one thing to do, and we don't always have the ability to do this, is to try to change things around. You know, if we want different results, sometimes we gotta change the way we're doing things. So, one of the things that I've fished jigs for over 20 years, and I love throwing them. Probably the most versatile bait there is in your tackle box, or it can be in your tackle box. You can put any kind of trailer on it. You pretty much put whatever action you want. If you're throwing things like crankbaits and stuff like that, I mean, if you get certain situations, that's pretty much all you can do with them is throw them out and wind them. You can start them and stop them. You kind of pop around the surface, different things like that. But for the most part, you're pretty much chuck and wind. A lot of other baits are that way, but a jig, you can put a different trailer on it, throw it out, wheel it back to you, and do different things. But one of the problems that I've been having just a couple times, and I've been just trying to piece in my mind, is how to keep fish pinned on your rod, which we know we'd love to all have that secret, right? How do I never lose a fish? Well, we know we're going to lose fish, but just giving you some of the ideas over the years in the last several weeks, again, that's come refreshing in my mind. Things that I'm wanting to do, things that I want to do different, pass them along. So one of the things about a finesse jig, that finesse little wire hook on there is really small, okay? It's a 4/0 hook, but it's kind of small in a sense that the diameter of the jig, of the hook, it's little. The gap is pretty wide. I mean, that's got a piece of plastic on it, but the gap's pretty wide. So one of the things that I was having every now and then is fish come up and just shake it. And when I would get a fish in, unless the fish really got a good inside the mouth, halfway through the throat, it's hard to keep a fish pinned. Well, what I remembered after doing this for a while, and I'm going to give you an example, I love using a medium heavy rod because there's always different applications you can use. Well, what I was reminded of these last several weeks is just because one company says it's a medium heavy rod, they all have different actions, okay? So I'm gonna give you an example. So this right here, and these are rods you can go out and buy if you wanted to. Some of you may even have them. This is an SLX 7-foot medium heavy. This is an awesome, it's got a fast action tip, very solid rod, okay? I'm bending that tip down a little bit, and it's got a little bit. You can see how it kind of arches just a little bit. I may have to move back just a little bit, but you can see how when I pull that, it's got a pretty good bend to it, and most of the bend is at the tip. But I'm putting a little bit of pressure to do that, okay? Not a lot, but I am putting a little bit of pressure. What does that do? That right there is perfect for not only casting, but also driving that hook home, because it's got quite a bit of backbone all the way from the tip all the way down. It's got a lot of backbone. Well, started to ponder in my mind, that a lot of times those fish are probably spitting those jigs because they're not getting them all the way in. The reaction. One of the things that I was having that rod do, I'd throw it out and I'd get it around limbs or trees underwater, and I would hang up. No matter what I tried to do, how slow I fished it, it would still put that pressure, because that little weed guard is kind of soft, okay? Because it don't take a whole lot of big weed guard, especially with that light hook. So in my mind, and what I tried and what I already had, was this right here is a arc catalyzer. This is the name of the rod, okay? This is a medium heavy also, but it's a little bit less expensive rod. And the action on it, in my opinion, I'll show you the bend on it, the same pressure. It's got a softer tip to it, okay? Softer tip. To me, this is more for a topwater type bait. But believe it or not, this rod right here is the one that I've already caught. I started using those finesse jigs on it, and it's almost got a topwater action. It really has an action of a medium, okay? I probably caught 20 fish in one day with it. Didn't lose but 2 all day. They were swallowing the bait a little bit deeper. But also what I learned was, I wound up catching one that was probably about 4 pounds. All in that same day, all using that same jig. Now on the other rod that was kind of stiff, when a fish hit me, I was able to set the hook, but a lot of times, as soon as they would come up out of the water, they would spit it. So what I realized, and when I saw one of the fish do, I saw the hole that it was leaving was a real big hole on the side of its jaw. So really what that rod was tending to do, with the same size line, I'm still using that 15-pound seagar, it was so stiff of a rod that it was putting too much pressure. So my hook set, it was putting too much pressure on that fish, so it was actually making holes in those fish and allowing them to throw the bait. But when I switched to this rod that's more of a topwater type action, I was able to catch more of those fish. But the problem was, even though I got that 4-pounder in, when it come to the actual pulling the fish out of cover, pulling the fish away, I noticed that on sometimes I couldn't control the fish as good. Mostly because this type of rod's better for some type of treble hook bait. So I was able to catch a lot of fish on it. I enjoyed it, okay? And I was doing pretty good, but in my mind, it's just how I am, I still wanted to try to find me a rod that had a little bit of both. I wanted something to have a backbone and at the same time have a soft tip. And in my mind, I couldn't picture that, and I couldn't really put it together. Well, I went to one of my local tackle shops, and a young man behind the counter, we started talking about it. He said, you know, he said, what you're talking about reminds me of a rod I got over there on the shelf. So I picked me one up. That rod over there on the shelf, this is an arc also, but this is a Tharp Series. This is called the Hammer, okay? And it's just the name for that rod. And this rod here, it's still medium heavy and it's 7 foot. But this rod has an extra fast tip. Now what that means on that extra fast tip, now I'm not putting half as much pressure, okay? And that tip is bending quite a bit, okay? I want you to see that. That tip is bending, but it stops at only about first 25%, and it's a lot softer of a rod. Now when I looked up, the person who designed this rod, they actually designed it to be a spinnerbait rod. They designed it to be an all-round rod. It just so happens that today, and I'll show you some pictures here in a little bit, I'll put some at the end of this little jig that I was fishing today, just about everything that I set the hook on, no longer was it just getting stuck. It was actually going all the way through the top of the bass, that top part of the mouth, all the way through several times. Now they were still little fish, But I realized that there's a lot more. Another thing I had happen is when I started getting around those trees underwater and I was bouncing it around, I could crawl it through that stuff just like I could with that topwater rod, because it just pulls the bait along. It doesn't put all that backbone into it. That tip allowed it to be more sensitive and allowed it to just come right through all those stick-ups and everything as I was fishing. So if I'm going to go fish deep, definitely this is the type of rod that I want, because a lot of times we think the reason my bait's getting hung up all the time is because, oh, it's just a bad bait, it has hook. No, a lot of time what it is we got the wrong rod for the wrong job. Like I said, it's been years since I spent this much time, all these little details of just how I am. You may not be that way. All you want to do is go out and cast it, fish it, and you can do that with this bait. But now when I go out and I start fishing, I can take and I can creep those through a lot of those stick-ups, because if you fish your bass very long, you're going to understand that if there's logs underwater, there's a good chance that largemouth and smallmouth and even spots are going to be right around you. Anyway, so the rod that I wind up with doesn't have to do with the rod itself. It's the action that it has. So I've got a medium heavy 7-foot for these finesse jigs, but it's got an extra fast tip. And that extra fast tip makes a big difference in trying to work these little baits deep and try to take your time with them. You want the old flipping hooks and you want the big baits with a big old 5/0 hook, then you know what? That SLX medium heavy, big strong one probably works. If you're going to throw a swim bait, that's the rod I like to throw it on. If I'm going to throw top water, I like throwing that other one. But if I'm going to throw these finesse jigs from now on, this is going to be the rod for me, because I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference coming through all that stuff, and it's a lot more sensitive, a lot easier to work this bait today. Just my idea, just some of my insights. Like I said, I'm not a professional, I'm just an average guy just like you all. Just blessed to be able to have a little time to go out and enjoy God's creation. Get you some of these M&J jigs, drag them deep. And when you're dragging them deep, I'm telling you, that extra fast, medium heavy rod is gonna make a big difference. Anyway, if y'all need any jigs or wanna get some, just send me a message. But more than anything, enjoy God's creation. God bless. Y'all have a great day.